Hey, everybody, welcome. We're at Disrupt TV. We're in the green room, and it's a Good Friday. We're going to introduce our guests in reverse order. Our first guest really doesn't need any introduction. Jon Reed, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about, and how is the Batcave?
Batcave, Western Mass. Pretty nice break from the road. We're gonna do a little halftime show assessment of the events so far, highs and lows, and what we need to get out of the next phase here.
Right, the first half event season, Enterprise Tech has been crazy. We'll find out more from Jon. So let's go to Jeremie and then Kaihan. So Jeremie first.
Yeah, Jeremie Kubicek. I'm from Oklahoma City. I've got my book is Communication Code. I'm talking about that a little bit, just jamming a little bit on how do you unlock relationships one conversation at a time.
Very cool. Kaihan, Rob, where are you guys coming from?
I'm calling in from Verbier, Switzerland. I live actually in Miami, but I'm just recovering from some 4 days of on the slopes with my family, and I'm here with my friend and co-author Rob to talk about proximity.
Ray, I can't top Switzerland, but I'm in Nashville at Vanderbilt University, where we just had a session here about proximity, and I'm with my wife and my daughters and my mom, and everybody's here. So, we could have a family show.
Hey, it's a family affair. Welcome to Disrupt TV. So thank you so much. All right. Well, with that, we're going to turn it back to Elle for the countdown, and then we'll kick it off.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you for joining us on Disrupt TV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at Disrupt TV Show. Send your questions to Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, and we'll do our best to answer them in the next hour. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV, I think just about every day on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, CNBC. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWAMG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to Disrupt TV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar. He's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of the multiple books, but more importantly, this one, Boundless, a new mindset for this new world of unlimited business success, and it's a #1 bestseller on Amazon. But more importantly, executives around the world follow him and his keynotes and every one of his insightful, innovative tweets. But more importantly, you can catch him writing about these stories about what's happening in the world on ZDNet, and of course, appearing on business outlets like Bloomberg and of course, national news outlets. So, but it's not about us; it's always about our amazing guests. Who do we have to kick it off? A dynamic duo. To say.
Yeah, please allow me to introduce both amazing guests, Professor Rob Wolcott and Kaihan Krippendorff, co-authors of Proximity, How Coming Breakthroughs in Just-in-Time Transform Businesses, Societies, and Daily Life. Rob is co-founder and chair of the World Innovation Network, Twin Global. Rob is adjunct professor of innovation at Booth School of Business, University of Chicago, and adjunct professor of executive education at Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University. Rob's books also include Grow From Within, Mastering Corporate Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Rob is an active venture investor in more than 30 companies, Ray, many of which are leading the proximity revolution. You can follow Rob on X and Robert C. Wolcott, Wolcott. Welcome, Rob, to Disrupt TV.
Great to be here. Thanks.
And Rob is joined by Kaihan Krippendorff, is a founder of Outthinker Networks, a global think tank and a professional. He's also a professional speaker. He's an author of Driving Innovation from Within, a guide for internal entrepreneurs. As former McKinsey consultant, Kaihan is strategic advisor to numerous leading corporations. He must have been an early adopter on X, because you can find him at Kaihan. Welcome, Kaihan, to Disrupt TV.
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
welcome. Both of you
here.
have written an amazing book, and the ability to think about the level of abundance and boundless capabilities that are there, I think, is important. So let's start with this basic question. How is proximity possible now? We're living in a digital world, and we're talking about physical proximity. We're talking about proximity across organizations, just the overall concept. What makes it possible?
Great. By the way, thanks, Ray and Vala, for having us. It was exciting to receive the call. I love your work. Boy, I want to ask you about metaverse economy. I want to ask you about AI adoption and enterprise, all that stuff. But regarding proximity, why now? Look, humans have wanted what we want, wherever we want, whenever, forever. And so the demand side has always been sort of clear. I mean, people want what they want. Whoever can give it to them ultimately is more likely to win. And the reality now is that we can do things we could never have done before. So in an industrial age, some of your listeners might remember something called just in time. It was in manufacturing, having just enough stuff in the manufacturing plant to hit your targets and nothing more. And it drove a lot of efficiency. But the reality was we wanted to do a lot more, but we couldn't. And now with digital technologies, and by the way, we don't just mean AI, mobile apps, we certainly do, but we also mean 3D printing. We mean rooftop solar power generation, anything that's digitally enabled. They allow us to compress capabilities in smaller and smaller packages and distribute them all over the economy, ever closer to each moment in time and space. And so therefore, they drive proximity, which is bringing production and provision of value ever closer to the moment of actual demand in time and space. And that's the notion of proximity.
God. Kaihan, anything you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I think that I would just add that I think Rob developed this concept of proximity, and what I loved about it, it kind of explains what's already happening. There are things happening around us that we kind of can't put a name to, but when you put the name proximity on it, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, AI makes sense. 3D printing makes sense. Predictability makes sense. Digital delivery, all this stuff that we think of as different trends actually come together, and we can see one picture. And that's what I think is really powerful about the concept.
I can't imagine any business leader who's attuned to the technological revolutions around us and the combinatorial factor of all these technologies, where together they can really turbocharge your velocity, speed, and direction. So when you're trying to convince them of delivering value at the speed of need, which I think is probably the most amazing benefit of proximity, how can organizations pivot to this? Especially if you're not a digital native company, you're a digital immigrant company. You weren't born in the cloud, you weren't born mobile, social, powered by AI. How can companies pivot to this new framework?
I mean, I think there are kind of two phases. There's the near-term opportunity, and then there's the long-term establishing the capabilities. Whereas the near-term opportunity is simply look at where is production done and where is provision done? Where do we manufacture relative in time, space? So how long before the need is made do we make the thing? And how far away do we make the thing? And then you can look at the trends, for example, 3D printing, more accurate identification of demand, to start moving production closer to when and where it's needed. I love this phrase of Rob's, about being. Sorry, Rob, can you use the right word for me? I'm not coming up with the right word, but basically waiting until last minute.
Oh yeah,
procrastination, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's sort of counterintuitive. Thanks, Kaihan. It's counterintuitive. What we're proposing is, let me back up briefly. When I first started talking about proximity back in about 2015, 16, people thought I meant better supply chain management. And I'm kind of like, yeah, that's nice. Everybody loves supply chain management. But really, Kaihan and I are talking about ripping that all apart and building technology platforms and business models that encourage us to procrastinate to wait as long as possible until there's an actual customer with a specific need, and then produce and provide. And Vala, to extend the answer to your question, there, as Kaihan said, are near-term opportunities, but there's a longer-term way to start to get your head around this, and that is orient around the customer. Figure out deeply what the customers actually want, and then say, in a future world where we can do anything coterminous co-located, anything at all, how might we provide that value? And then you work backwards from that, and you'll discover that there are a lot of technologies out there that are already there that allow us to do it. And 3 years, 5 years from now, they'll be ready. So that's how you start to get ready. But then, as Kaihan said, in the near term, you say, so what are some things we can do to radically decrease risk in our supply chain? What are some things we can do digitally, fully digitally, to bring things coterminous, co-located anywhere in the world? So there's a near-term play and there's a long-term play. And by the way, we know everything's going toward a proximate world. We have lots of evidence for that.
Yeah, Rob, it's great. The words you use, the language you use. Ray and I recently interviewed Jeff Bezos, chief of staff, and they talked about customer centricity and working backwards.
Yep.
And there's no company that I think, at least in my mind, best represents delivering products, services in as close to real time as you can. So
yeah, well, actually, you're right on, Vala. Jeff Bezos has been thinking about this since the very beginning. He just didn't call it proximity, but he's always been passionate about whatever we can do to serve customers where they are, when they want to be served. They're going to try and do it. I mean, people thought years ago, remember when they started launching drones to deliver stuff, and people sort of laughed and they said, oh yeah, that's cute. They didn't laugh. They said, we better be ahead of this.
Yeah, I think.
Good point. And go ahead, Kaihan.
No. Well, I just say you could probably take almost every breakthrough strategy that Amazon has used, and you could say that it argue that it increases proximity. You go into a Barnes and Noble, and you could spend an hour there, and then you might buy a book, and they get one piece of information about you. You spend an hour on Amazon, you buy nothing. They get a lot of it. They've turned us into digital customers. So when we become digital customers within the ecosystem of other devices that we're interacting with, now we can more accurately pinpoint when and where something is needed. Now you add the drones, you add the fact that as soon as the law changed and they had to pay taxes in order to ship outside of state, then they build distribution centers outside of every city. They go from 3-day to 2-day to 1 day. What you can see is on both ends, identifying demand and delivering, they are looking to just shorten proximity.
Yeah, and when you think about that, I mean, let's take it home to a real example. Like, let's take something like healthcare and medicine. How's proximity changing healthcare and medicine?
Yeah, I want to start with that one and briefly share a personal story. So, as we mentioned in the book, my father, Bob Wolcott, died unexpectedly at the age of 63 from an aortal aneurysm. 2 months prior, he had a completely clean bill of health. He had And if you fast forward to today, we have Apple Watches and Oura Rings and things like this. But imagine 5 years or 10 years from now, where every aspect of our living system is being tracked in every moment, anywhere we are. And healthcare is disappearing into our daily lives. What is this? This is all proximity, because it's following us around at every moment, real time. And so what happens? Proximity pushes healthcare from curing things to preventing things. Mm-hmm. And this is in each of our chapters about how we live in the book. We try and draw it. How does proximity look in food and ag? How does proximity look in power generation? How does it look in defense? How does it look in creating and producing? So in healthcare, it pushes from curing to prevent for a simple reason. When you're monitoring every aspect of a person's system and there's an AI in the background looking at weak signals, it says, hey, Vala, you know what? We see this thing. It's not a big deal. Go to the doctor. And the doctor says, hey, you know what? You've got stage 0 pancreatic cancer. No big deal. Do this. We fixed it. But, the way we do it now is you're not feeling well. You go to the doctor and you discover you've got incurable cancer. So it's a completely, utterly different model. And that is definitely where we're going with healthcare.
Now, we in the last 10 minutes, we've referenced great American companies, great technology born in America. So I would assume that countries like America have a great advantage towards the realization of proximity. So my question, I guess, is proximity anti-globalization, or what are your thoughts in terms of the world being able to take advantage of everything we're talking about?
I would say we see evidence of proximity. I think what drives proximity is not only opportunity, but also need. And so in resource constrained environments where we see a real drive for proximity, one of the cases that we study is in Bangladesh, for example, where my mother's from. And there are really exciting things happening about creating proximately generated energy so that we can be less dependent on supply, and we can be and create more robust systems to deliver energy, so lights can be on. I know there are lots of examples, and a lot of proximate technologies and advances are coming outside of the United States. But it does, I think, decrease the need for global interdependence, and I think that drive is one of the geopolitical trends that are driving.
Let's stick on that. I think it's a really good point. So we've got globalization versus nationalism that's happening. We've got centralization versus decentralization. Is decentralization also a trend here? Because you talk about power distribution and generation, right? Generac is a great example. I've got a 75 coming soon, right? I mean, the question is like, right? Am I trying to be off the grid? Or why do I want to move in this?
Right.
Why is that part of that trend?
So there's a lot, and there's so much to build on Kaihan's point. I'll just briefly say that developing countries have an even greater opportunity because they can leapfrog. I mean, I was in Rwanda earlier this year. Zipline is delivering medical supplies everywhere in the country in a matter of an hour. Bhutan late last year, where they're building distributed hydroelectric and small scale. So they have the opportunity to leapfrog. To your point, Ray, about deglobalization and all this. Obviously, technology itself is not driving that, but it's certainly catalyzing a lot of stuff. And what proximity allows us to do is build resiliency and adaptability within these contexts. With respect to globalization, remember, we built this globalized world such as it is based on the technology and the capabilities we had in the industrial age. And now we have a completely different set of technology capabilities. So the way I like to think about it, rather than proximity driving us away from each other, we'll continue to depend on each other in different ways. But using proximity well as a business or as a matter of national policy will actually decrease dependency. So to me, it's anti-dependency as opposed to anti-globalization.
Sure.
Now I don't pretend to have an answer to nationalism and people throwing stuff at each other and all that.
Yeah.
But well, that's a different show.
But I do think, like you mentioned India, for example, with Bangladesh and I recently read every 10 seconds, 3 citizens in India connect to the internet for the first time. And this will fuel 600 million users of internet to over 1 billion in a very near term. And I think as long as you have internet access, you have access to affordable education, you have access to work. And so I guess my question, what would you say a company like Starlink is a company that's turbocharging the path to independence, resiliency, and ultimately increasing validating your thesis of the importance of proximity?
I think not unlike Amazon, you could take almost every one of Elon Musk's strategies and you can say
100%.
that is a drive for proximity.
It is.
Whether that's tunneling under, whether that is
or going to Mars.
Yeah.
Or Vala, Neuralink. I mean, in the last chapter in proximity, Kaihan and I talk about the 2 horizons of the 21st century, and they are space and virtual reality. Because we haven't really been to either one. I mean, some of us have been to the moon. I do believe that, by the way. But both of those spaces are 100% proximate. And imagine in a future world where you've got your Neuralink set up, you can have any experience, anytime, anywhere. And that's true proximity.
I sense an amazing workshop that corporates could be doing around proximity and how to humanize a world in machine scale. You put those 2 things together, that would just be an amazing corporate retreat for companies to be innovative, think about where that future is headed,
and
really redesign their systems, because that is so
great
amazing.
in a machine-led, human-assisted world, which I believe we're heading towards. I mean, remember, Amazon 2012 had 0 robots. Today, there's 750,000 robots in the warehouses. So we are in a machine. Proximity is going to become so important in this part of your investment thesis, your ecosystem building thesis, how you build platforms. Congratulations, you two. I think you're a massive bestseller.
We have a
in your
bestseller
hands.
ahead of
You
here.
really do.
And you know,
really
this
do.
is proximity in action. We got to talk about it here early in front of everybody. This book comes out May 28th.
First time. Yeah.
May 28th, first podcast, May 28th. Congratulations here. Please get the book on pre-order. Professor Rob Wolcott, Kaihan Krippendorff, co-authors of Proximity, How Coming Breakthroughs in Just-in-Time Transform Business, Society, and Daily Life. You can follow him on X at Robert C. Wolcott and at Kaihan. So good job there with the X. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
both.
guys.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Really,
Wow.
really powerful
concept. I mean, we're looking.
really big concept. Yeah. That's one to explore for sure. And by the way, the better the proximity, the closer the resiliency, the more important need for effective communication. So, and with that, our next guest, Jeremie Kubicek, co-author of Communication Code: Unlock Every Relationship, One Conversation at a Time. Jeremie is executive chairman, co-founder of Giant Worldwide and Giant Companies. Jeremie is an experienced keynote speaker and author. At his core, Jeremie is a rational intelligence expert with a passion for helping employees and teams know themselves to lead themselves. Jeremie is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Making Your Leadership Come Alive and the Peace Index. And additional, Jeremie, sorry, I had to cut your bio short. You only have 20 minutes. Jeremie speaks to organizations throughout the world on rational intelligence and personal growth. His content is used inside of small companies you may have heard of, like Google and Pfizer.
I don't know who they are.
And about 115 plus countries. You can find him on X at Jeremie Kubicek, Kubicek. Welcome, Jeremie, to Disrupt TV.
Yeah, good to be with you guys. It's so fun listening to what you're talking about, especially from a technology side. And all of our businesses are tech companies. We converted all of our content to master licensing and then SaaS businesses. But at the core of all of it, you think about this idea of relational intelligence. We've got artificial intelligence. We've got financial intelligence. You've got physical intelligence. You've got all these people who are working on intellectual intelligence. But we're making the case for, even in the midst of all of that, there's certain things that never change. People dynamics, relational dynamics. You might be the most brilliant person of all time, but I don't like you. So therefore, I don't want to be around you. I don't want to listen to you. So your influence is zero to me because you don't know how to connect. And that's really what we talked a lot about. In the midst of all of these dynamics, how do you actually build relational intelligence while everyone else is expanding their intelligence?
I love the fact that likability is in your equation in terms of ingredients. Yes, you're smart. Yes, you're kind and you have good EQ, IQ, LQ, love quotient. But if I don't like you, you're right. Back to zero.
Part of that is really deciphering people's expectations, right? And you talk about that. I mean, let's go through those 4 stages of deciphering people's expectations. It's a good baseline before we get to other parts of the book.
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about it, the idea is that communication is really transmission. I'm transmitting an expectation. So if I'm talking to you, what am I transmitting? I'm asking something of you, or I'm wanting something of you. And so most people think they're communicating when they're actually transmitting. So in our case, we like to go, look, transmissions have expectations attached to them. Communication is just expectation wrapped up in a transmission. Do you understand what you want? What is it you want? What is it they want? And can you actually get there? That's the short form of that. That's the easiest way to describe that.
And you have not a golden rule, but a platinum rule that you share in your book. Can you tell us about the platinum rule. Of
Yeah, and the
communication.
platinum rule is not, that's not mine. It's a general term, but the idea of the platinum rule is the golden rule is do unto others as you want done to yourself. Well, I don't need a hug. Why do you need a hug? I didn't get training. Why do you need training? I just figured it out. That's not the golden rule. The golden rule is really the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they would want done. So if you understand, okay, well, Vala, what do you want? What is it you're wanting? And if I can actually learn to connect with you. The problem with most communication is it's the definition of insanity. People do the same thing over and over again, expect different results, and it doesn't work. And then they get mad at the other person. Man, Vala, what's his deal? Gosh. Well, might it be you? That's really what we start with. What's it like to be on the other side of you? And so the first couple of chapters, we actually look back. We ask people to pick a relationship you want to fix and then go through the entire book working on that relationship. But we start with, what has it been like to be on the other side of you? What's the negative power that you might have exuded? So
can I follow up? And I don't mean to label people. I think labels are for jars, not people. But we do hear that there are givers and there are takers. I don't know if it was Adam Grant or wherever, the notion of givers and takers. But the fact that you're talking about being self-aware enough to make sure that you're communicating to meet the needs of the person you're trying to connect with, can I assume that givers are better communicators than takers? Because their benevolence, their intention is to really add value to someone, or is that mistaken?
It's a little bit more complex than that. So we've actually done a lot of work on this called the 5 voices, and we've actually dissected the personality by percentages. Okay. And it comes down to thinkers and feelers, present oriented and future oriented. They do it in a different way, but but for every one of us, we all have expectations. So if you can learn, and this is the secret of the book, we figured this out between me and my business partner, Steve Cockram. We were getting in these fights and these arguments, and we're like, what is it? And it was the reality that I was bringing something and I was looking for celebration. And he would take my cake, my birthday cake of celebration I wanted, and he'd just pour water right on top of it with something called critique. And he starts critiquing when I'm wanting to celebrate, and we were miscommunicating. And typically what happens then is most people, they put their wall of self-preservation up and then they back away. And then they go, forget you, man. I'm never, ever doing that again. But they never tell you that, but they pull back. And then you go, man, what's his deal? Wonder he must have ate something wrong today. It was actually a miscommunication. So what we've done is we use the Enigma code, the whole metaphor, the Enigma code, and going, look, every person has a code. If you can decipher the code, then speak that code, speak their language, then you're going to connect, guaranteed. So we figured out what the 5 code words are, and that's been the most powerful thing for us.
Before we get to those 5 code words, actually, what I really like was the one chapter where you talk about how to do the critique, right, versus criticism. So you talk about how critique is different than criticism, and you talk about how to deliver it in a way that works for you, not against you, if I remember. So delve deep into that.
So the idea then is the other person has to know, are you for them? Are you for yourself? Or are you against them? I mean, that's what people are deciphering. So what happens then is if you are with an insecure person, they might view everyone is against them.
Oh, yes.
So there's some dynamics at play. But let's just say, have you established, hey, Ray, I'm for you, man. I'm totally for you. I want the best for you. I'm fighting for your highest possible good. And if you know that, then I should be able to come to you and go, hey, I'm going to do you want me to critique? And that's one of the 5 C's. But if you're not in a place, and if I'm not communicated very well, then you might hear what I'm saying as critical. Critical is negative. Critique is meant to be positive. Critique is meant to be like, hey, here's my idea. What do you think of it? Make it better, right? And so what happens is that most people, they take an idea and they put it right over their heart. And then as you critique it, blood starts flowing down their shirt. And you're like, seriously? Why did you put it over your heart? This was not personal. Like, no, everything's personal. And so what happens in this miscommunication, and so you get one issue happens, and then people get a long memory, and they'll never forget that one moment, and they're never going to do that again. And then now you're in a place where you're clueless because they viewed you as being critical when you were just trying to bring critique.
And with best intentions.
With best intentions.
Yeah. And I've always tried to determine when I'm engaged with someone, am I witnessing critical thinking that's aimed to help me eliminate blind spots or expand my purview, or is it cynicism? Is it they just like pouring water on the cake? They like deflating, so I've gone through my career literally trying to make sure that if it's critical thinking, I will accept it with open arms. So I guess it's benevolence. I need to be clear about the person's intention. Are you going to help me win, or are you just trying to slow me down? And
are you for me or against me?
Yeah. Are you for me or against me? And it turns out that when you're a disruptive thinker, doer, where you're blazing a path where others haven't been to, Ray and I, we have patents, we've invented things. I'm telling you, along the way, people love shitting on your idea, especially if it challenges especially if it challenges dominant logic. And most disruptive work challenges dominant logic. So you're bound to be in front of cynics and even critical thinkers who mean well, but they really are just trying to maybe save you, but in an unhealthy way. John Wooden famously said, a good coach is someone who can give feedback without causing resentment. So you are known as a people whisperer. You're known as working with the biggest companies in the world, across all over the world, and really making people reanalyze how they communicate. How do you become a people whisperer? And by the way, it's something we could maybe put into play this year.
So we basically figured out that team leaders are the most important people inside organizations.
Team leaders.
Because your team leaders are like Sherpa on Mount Everest.
Yes.
You need Sherpa to get to the top. If you don't have a healthy Sherpa, that team is stifled. So the team leaders become the secret, and that's what we put in place inside organizations around the world. But the idea of the communication code, the part of it is we give them the code words. There's 5. So if you understand celebration, care, clarity, collaboration, or critique. What is it that you're looking for? So now here it is. So Ray, you got an idea. Awesome. I'm going to pause before I start anything. What would you like from me? Do you want me to celebrate, care, clarify, collaborate, or critique? You go, you know what? I want you to clarify first, and then I want your collaboration because you're brilliant.
But you never tell me care. What's wrong? No,
but that's the problem. So some people have a tendency to be critique. And the other person's wanting care. All of a sudden, now we've got ships passing in the night. Yep. So if you understand, that's all this is understand code words. It is a code. If you meet their expectations, their walls will come down, and now you're going to unlock that relationship.
When you're in front of CEOs, what's the word that they most often ask you of the 5? and the words change based on the level in the organization.
So in it, critique is the norm for most CEOs, but they don't want it. They give it. They don't want it. It's interesting. So we play this game.
They're producers. They're not receivers. Right?
The game is, I say, now take a person, any person, they pick a person. I go, now what do you tend to do to them? What are your top 2? And what do they tend to do to you? And what is the top 2 you want from them? So then you customize it and you realize, oh my gosh, my wife wants care and clarity, and I bring collaboration and critique. Okay. And you know what I want? I want clarity and celebration, and my wife brings, and we're just missing. So in the same way with CEOs, they're just unaware of what it's like to be on the other side of themselves. And so we go, wouldn't you like to be more influential? If you want to increase your influence, then you've got to have relational intelligence.
This is going to help with every family dinner going forward. I can imagine Easter Sunday.
Absolutely.
Honestly, Ray.
I just asked. It is disruptive in a different way, because what we have is we have these norms, and the norms inside of family dynamics or team dynamics. People are just used to the way that things are. Oh yeah, here he is. He's going to say that thing again. And so in this case, we actually disrupt it by learning code words. Then now you unpack, you can literally unlock a person. And then they're like, oh my gosh, you're different than you normally are. What did you just do? You did some magic on me.
Well, I'm thinking about it this way. I mean, that changes the whole dynamics of trying to get people to collaborate, right? Because when you're talking over each other, you don't really collaborate. But when you actually have the ability to actually have cleaner communications, it changes everything. I mean, this is amazing. So
I know that with my children, they tend to go to their mom first when they want to share anything about life, school, college, work, because she defaults to care, I default to critique. And I after talking to you, I now realize, like, I'm instantly giving unsolicited feedback because their dad made more mistakes than probably anyone they've ever met in their life, young adult. Yeah, I made a ton. So, I tried to be original mistakes. The same, when you make the same exact mistake twice, that's a decision. That's not a mistake. So I default to critique. And my wife, who's much smarter than I am, listens with empathy, invites the whole story, and then starts with care. So I really think that super important wisdom nugget, Jeremie, you dropped on us. And I hope our audience can reflect like I am, that I need to change my defaults. Go ahead, Ray. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, like, when you do workshops like this, like, I mean, are they big groups? Are they small groups? Like, what's the impact when you come out of these? Is it typically executive teams?
So we have about 1,000 coaches and consultants, and they do all. So big workshops, team. We'll teach teams the communication code. Start with celebration. What do we want to celebrate this week? 2, care. Anything going on? Anyone know of anything? Yeah, Sarah's grandfather passed away, whatever. 3, clarify. What are we working on today? 4, collaborate. Okay, let's get into it. And then 5, you won't need critique because you've gone through all of that. So that's one way that a lot of teams are using it in team meetings. And so there's just different ways. Then interpersonal dynamics, relational dynamics, it's working brilliantly because now you've got common language. And here's the secret. Subjectivity is where all drama comes from. It's why we have such sideways energy inside organizations, because people are subjective. Objectivity is when you have a common language, you have a visual tool, you've got something you can actually use. Now we have common tools to use. Now I know, oh, you're looking for clarity. Yeah. So is this what you're saying, Ray? And now I'm connecting with you. And now that subjectivity and drama maybe goes to the wayside.
I feel like we should bring you in for one of our workshops.
Yeah, no, and I don't mean to add another C, but I feel like if there's alignment with these 5 C's, there's inevitably a 6th C, co-creation, that you're turbocharging. I'm assuming that if you're aligned on all 5, whatever job to be done, former Clay Christensen's thesis, that co-creation is much smoother, much faster, much more
It's
impactful.
the outcome. It's the outcome. It's connecting. You're going to connect more. You're going to co-create. You're going to, it just expedite any alignment and leads to higher execution, leads to better capacity. A lot of capacity constraints are because I don't like you and I'm tired of working with you. I'm done. We're finished. But if I like you and I know you're valuing me and you see me for what I'm doing, I'm going to want to participate more. So I'm going to become more engaged versus compliant. And most employees are compliant.
I'm interested to know how these advanced companies like Google that you're working with, are they trying to codify the communication code into the algorithms so that they're actually adding a certain level of emotional intelligence to the robotic, the natural language conversations to know which one of the C's they need to inject into the conversation?
We're planting seeds for them to do that. I'll be in Singapore here in a month, and but most people aren't getting what you just said. But absolutely, that's the direction, because if you can get to that, we're making everything more relationally intelligent. So I think even AI can become more relationally intelligent.
That has to be a design principle in AI, because we're going to have conversations with apps and phones and anything that can connect will connect. So how do we codify communication code and create algorithms that know which C matters most at the moment of truth? There's a startup in that.
And the cultural implications are going to be huge, but that's just how people kind of communicate. But here with Jeremie Kubicek, co-author of the Communication Code, Unlock Every Relationship One Conversation at a Time. We really have to get you in for a workshop. This is gonna be fun. You can follow him on X at Jeremie, Jeremie Kubicek, and of course, get his book on Amazon. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks,
amazing.
Guys.
Congratulations on the book. Amazing.
Yep, congratulations. Ooh.
You know, I think I'm realizing that I'm an ineffective communicator. I love this show, but when smart people like make you aware of certain massive blind spots you have, it doesn't feel great. Although I'm grateful for learning.
No. Part of it is the code, right? I mean, understanding what people's motivations, how they're communicating, their intention, right, and what they're trying to help, and of course motivation, right? I mean, in a world of a commonwealth of self-interest, if you understand the code, it's actually pretty cool. So I don't know. I went through the book.
Speaking of a great communicator and an icon in this community and other communities, Jon Reed is joining us. He's co-founder of Diginomica. He's been building communities since the 90s. I don't mean to say that he's old. Jon is Diginomica co-founder, an enterprise irregular, and a creator of content unlike anyone else. He's earned a reputation for his outspoken views and research on pros and cons of, for example, generative AI lately. People want to hear from Jon because he explains to us use cases that matter. Jon's signature weekly column, Enterprise Hits and Misses, is a bit of a punchy enterprise review for readers who enjoy, puncturing hype balloons. This is the guy. Jon's core areas of research now is customer experience, pursuit of AI analytics, return on investment, future of work and skills development, and realities of transformation efforts. He's also an early adopter at X. You can follow him at Jon ERP, Jonerp. Welcome back, First Ballot Hall of Fame inductee to Disrupt TV, Jon Reed. Welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Jon. Hey, we can't start the show without having Jonisms, so let's go there. Talk about Jonisms.
Oh, I got to explain what that is. Yes.
Yeah. Tell us what it is, what the heck are they and what are we talking about?
So Jonisms were just like things that I started to pile up, like how I view the market that like strike me as a little bit like different than other people, or maybe just things that aren't emphasized as much, because you probably know this by now, but one of my big things is that we need to create our own narratives more in this industry and not just accept the narratives that are being spoon-fed from the keynote stage. So like if you want an example of a Jonism, I'll give you one. The technology paradox. And here's what I think that is. Enterprise technology has gotten good enough that the irony is that it confronts us with people and process. And I think you just found that out in the last conversational segment. And it's fascinating because in the 90s, I wrote a newsletter called Extending the Enterprise, and I was all excited about how the enterprise is so insular. We need to connect to all these external constituents and make this whole thing real. The technology wasn't there for that. You know this, Ray. You were an analyst at the time. The technology sucked. It couldn't deliver. The integrations were too hard. Now look, technology's not perfect today, right? There's a lot of problems with the tech that we're using, but for the most part, we're in the realm where the tech isn't the problem. And if you choose the right, you have to make the right decisions and the right investments, but which puts an ironic refocus on people and process, which is where we're at. And in every industry, that's the issue. Now, you could talk about automation and AI all you want, but ultimately, those are tools for enabling talent, and the focus is going to come back to your talent and your people. So that's a Jonism. I got about 20 of them, but that's one of them.
I don't know. We should jump into other ones.
Oh, you want another one?
Yeah, but give me a Jonism after you hear, for example, Jensen talk about CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, talk about NVIDIA, and he says to the audience, look, nature of computing has changed. When you were talking in the 90s or 2000s or even a decade ago, for all of our lifetime with technology, he said you push a few buttons, electrons leave your phone, go to a data center, and you retrieve information. He says nature of hardware and software design has changed because it's no longer just retrieving information, you're generating that new, which means all of computing is going to change. What is your reaction when you hear, and I'm going to paraphrase what you said, like technology abundance, where the art of the possible is no longer a technology deficit per se, it's your culture, your talent, your processes, and the ecosystem you've built that's going to ultimately limit you from doing things. It's not technology per se.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's a lot of disruptions to follow, and there's no way to deny that. Ray's been talking a lot about decentralization lately, and I applaud that conversation. And decentralization versus centralization is by no means ruled out. I mean, the trend towards centralization right now is quite strong, and that's going to impact our ability to create and quote unquote innovate. And so that's one of the big storylines I'm watching. Now, speaking of what we learned this spring, one thing we got a good news in the decentralized bucket from the EU AI Act, which ended up putting some more like lenient standards for open source AI that is not in commercial production. This is really important because if regulations limit what we can do with open source technologies, because it's not fair, right, to ask a bunch of like hardworking volunteer open source people to comply with, you know, massive international regulations that you would impose upon a Microsoft or a Google. So if we can make smarter decisions like that around our regulations and see if that holds, that puts more of these tools in our hands. And then to your point, Vala, now we can talk about what are we going to create with those tools. And to me, that's a really exciting conversation. And unfortunately, we're not having it enough right now because so much of what we're having right now is like, ooh, AI this, AI that, as opposed to like how the whole point of all of this, and this is another Johnism, is sort of like this whole thing around the 80-20, that all of this is going back to, we've been mostly in white collar work, 80% admin and at best 20% strategic. Are we ever going to flip that around? That's what this should be about in the end. But if we're not careful, these systems aren't going to work that way. And that's one thing I would really push back on, is this whole thing around an optimistic view that if we sit back and relax, this technology is going to work fine for us. We have to be active participants and shape where this goes.
Yeah, it's a great point. And the notion of not having enough demand for work is actually interesting, because human desire, the level of expectations only keep ramping up. And so to believe that we're going to stay static for the level of demand we have today is not true, right? We expect things to be even better, even faster, even cheaper. And that's really what drives that innovation and the advancements. If that dies, yeah, then things will be static, and you won't have additional jobs. You won't have additional opportunities. So we do see that. But regulation has been an interesting point, because we're not sure what to regulate, because we're not sure what it is yet. And all these folks are putting barriers in place just to say, hey, look, I regulated AI. Oh, congratulations. But do you know what you did? No. So we're in that scenario that's pretty tough. But that does take us to every conference we have been talking about AI. And we are kind of at the halfway mark between spring events and where we're headed. Tell us what's going on. Like, what's the event scene? Like, do you believe we all have AI? Like, what's going on?
So we've learned a bunch of stuff, and there's some stuff that we haven't learned yet. And I'll be curious to get the input of the two of you on a little bit of this too. I think, you know, one thing that we've definitely learned is that NVIDIA is going to be putting on an AI carnival every year. And
it's 208 billion transistors in a square like that. I mean, I'm an electrical engineer, and I don't even understand. It's beyond my comprehension.
But the thing we do have to remember is that there's certain companies that are essentially, if you look at AI like the gold rush, like NVIDIA is selling the pots and pans, so they're going to win no matter what you find in them thar hills, and customers are not going to find it so easy to find the gold as NVIDIA is. And this is really important to keep in mind, because right now there's a lot of enterprise software vendors whose stock is surging and I believe they're being given an AI dividend they haven't earned yet. And so we're going to have to keep an eye on that, because when you look at customers, it's a little bit different story. I mean, on Diginomica, I was fascinated to read a recent piece that Stuart Lochner wrote on Accenture and how they've topped
$1 billion booking
in Gen AI books,
bookings.
it's in six months, but overall revenues remain flat as macro concerns hit hard. And then the CEO, Julie Sweet, says there's universal recognition of the importance of AI at prevention, but the ability to use it at scale varies widely with clients on a continuum. And she talks about those having strong digital cores moving forward, while most clients are coming to grips with the investment needed. And this is one of the big things that we're learning. And it's a fascinating parallel track, because on the one hand, on the consumer side, we're seeing these models kind of get exposed to a certain point for being inaccurate. Like Google had the whole Gemini fiasco, and you could type in things into the prompt and see historical like portraits that were, you see people of color as Nazis or whatever. It's like really awkward. Like, how did this happen? Like, exposing this technology. On the other side, you see enterprises and enterprise software companies that are working really, really hard to create more responsible versions of this technology. And so that's a really big theme that we're seeing, is the so-called responsible AI, and the enterprise having a chance to redeem itself after always being embarrassed by consumer technology. Now the time the enterprise can lead the way here if they can get out of their own way. And I think it's a fascinating subtext, but it does require data. It requires customer data to get this right. And that's the catch. And that's the reason why you can't just do all this stuff out of the box. Like, okay, so for productivity tools, maybe you can, because like you put like an Office 365 thing and it's writing some nice emails for you, whatever. But for much more deeper stuff, when you're talking about things like predicting, trends in payment scenarios, or, manufacturing, preventative maintenance scenarios, and interacting with equipment using Gen AI tools and stuff like that. This is unproven stuff, and customers really have a lot of questions. And so, that's a big thing we're seeing right now, is the release of functionality, but the customers have questions and concerns. And so we've been documenting a lot of that on Diginomica and trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
If you're looking for manufacturing use cases, by the way, for Gen AI, I have folks you can speak to. I just came from a manufacturing conference where there were some really strong use cases for billing, for lead time analysis, for even recommending vendors for alike SKUs. Really fascinating, because I don't view manufacturing, I don't mean to say this in a disparaging way, as like a leading industry of adopting emerging new tech. But I was surprised. I saw some really, really, really cool generative and predictive use of AI in the manufacturing space. When you go to these
and by the way, real quick, I just did a piece on Diginomica about Gen AI trends based on a recent report, and one of the interesting things was manufacturing in this report came out in the top 3 sectors for spending on Gen AI, which really surprised me. And I talked with the authors about that, and they talked about how their theory is that manufacturers are steeped in automation and are actually pretty open to sort of what the next step in automation might look like. But anyway, it's interesting because
and they have data that can be used to train the models. A research that came out in December of 2023, looking at cross-section of enterprise, identified only 4% of the data companies have. 4% is data that's accessible, relevant for training models. If a shelf life of an enterprise app is only 4 years old, there's a lot of data decay, usefulness of data. Data has a shelf life. Most businesses think they have a lot, but they don't realize that in this case, it revealed 96% of it is useless. So every AI project starts as a data project, and if you don't have your shit together with data, good luck. You're not gonna reap the benefits of all that you hear at these events. Go ahead, Ray. Sorry.
Oh, no. I'm saying billions of dollars about to be wasted. To your point, Vala. I mean, that's the challenge, right? So because you don't have enough data, and as one of our guests here is saying, like, rapid decentralization patterns now after a long centralization, it's very true, right? We're actually headed in this model, and so we're going to see that, and the notion that we talked about in proximity is one part of that, right?
I am going to challenge that a little bit, though, because the overriding trend is AI, and AI generally does require vast amounts of resources right now. And so there is a real concern around the centralization of AI that hasn't been resolved yet. But I have been impressed by by the amount of interesting startup activity in this space. So I think,
Totally,
you know,
totally.
I'm with Ray on the decentralization trend. I just think we do need to be aware that deep pockets are in pretty strong position, including a lot of incumbent vendors that you would think, well, why would these big ERP companies have massive stock valuations right now? Guess what? They have a shitload of customer data, and you don't.
Well, this is the
So
data Inc. premise, right? I mean, the book
Yeah.
I might write
Yeah.
one day, right? I mean, companies will be valued on the data sets they have and the interactions in the future, as opposed to just on the revenues, right?
Yeah,
Because the
absolutely.
valuation component is going to have a data aspect to it, which is
John, what are you looking for? Like, if you're going to give an A grade to a conference, what are the one or two things that they need to satisfy to earn your A grade?
yeah. And the top 3 conferences you've been to so far in the whole conference season.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, it's tough because I think like ultimately conferences are for attendees, not for me. Um, so, so
Said one of the most
I-
influential publishers on earth. Yeah.
yeah, they're not really for me. But what I'm really looking for on the ground is I'm looking for things that customers can use now. I wrote in my piece today that there's this thing called the AI news chase going on that I think is a really, really bad trend. And what I wrote was like that it's like so wonderful in the era of SaaS. I'm just trying to pull this up right now just to read you my quote. My biggest frustration is the dreaded AI news chase. One great thing about SaaS vendor emergence was most of the new functionality from the keynote stage was already shipping. You can go back to your product and turn this functionality on now. What a winning keynote line. Alas, that's all but forgotten now, with vendors racing to stake their Gen AI claim and pushing out previews. And meanwhile, customers have immediate questions about release timeframes, pricing, data movement, and thus the on-the-ground news chases people like Ray and myself go scurrying around trying to figure out what's real and what's not. And it's so hard to do. And so one of my big criteria right now is tell me from the keynote stage what customers can use right now. And bring on customers on stage to speak to the benefits they're already achieving, because we act like AI was invented yesterday. But if you've been doing this right, you have customers that have been using algorithms and machine learning for years. Bring those people on stage right now. You know, bring your robotics customers that are effectively using this for automation in factory. Bring them on stage right now and help us understand what you're doing now, and then be very clear about what's not ready yet and when it's coming. And this whole obfuscation of what's here and what's not, it's totally lame, and customers hate it.
Customers really hate it.
Hey,
Customers don't like
you
it.
you and I live in Massachusetts. So if you ever want to go to Boston Dynamics and meet Chad Bright, who's the CIO at Boston Dynamics, he'll show you things that are gonna really, I mean, it's mind numbing what they're doing there.
Well, it's a great
Anytime
point.
you want to go, let's go. Again, I can't speak to it because they're doing stuff that hasn't been revealed yet.
Right.
But wow, you want to see robots doing
Yeah.
cool stuff with AI? We can go see it firsthand. It's pretty
From
awesome.
ballet to ballistics, they've got them all.
Yeah, pretty awesome. Yeah, we gotta get Chad. We should get him on the show. But John, if you ever want to see robots doing cool things using AI, we can make. I'd like to see you see that. So
Well, we've got the halftime report here from John. What's going on in events, and of course some Johnisms to wrap it up. But Jon Reed, co-founder of Diginomica, thank you so much for being on the show. Follow him on X at Jon ERP. So thanks, see you guys
John.
in the green room.
You got it.
Thank you so much. He's you know what I think, we talk. I don't know, in the bio I was like, controversial or outspoken. The reason John has built such a stellar reputation is because he cares about observability. He wants to observe end users building and growing their businesses as a result of technology. So it's not enough for vendors to just talk about the goodness of what they're building. The real winning is when the consumers of said technology come on stage and said, look what I'm doing, and it's better, faster, smarter. So John's pursuit of observability, of end user benefit, that's not outspoken. That's the whole industry should lead that way. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's a great point. I mean, the industry should operate that way. It doesn't always operate that way, but this is kind of where we are. So
yeah. Anyway, speaking of companies doing amazing work in this space, we have one of our favorite guests, Paul Daugherty, who's the Group Chief Executive Technology and Chief Technology Officer at Accenture. about 500,000 people report to Paul. Paul's going to join us and talk about, that $1 billion of booking with AI, generative AI projects. But more importantly, Paul always expands our minds to try to see what the future looks like 2, 3, 5 years from now. And we also have Eric Siegel, author of The AI Playbook. So you can get a sense of the theme for next week. Mastering the rare art of machine learning deployments. So Paul Daugherty, Eric Siegel, fasten your seatbelt, get your popcorn ready. Next week's show is going to be amazing, just like this week's show. Ray, closing comments as we finish episode 358.
No, I think the important part here is the fact that we've got amazing guests coming through. Today, we learned a lot about communication styles. I think that was important. There's brand new business models that are emerging in a digital world with proximity. I think it's not just the business models, it's the cultural and the orientation that's going to be required. If we think about how people can unlock those capabilities, we see that happening, especially with how we communicate with each other internally in organizations. And I think, this is truly the age of AI. Like we're going to work with how to actually build business models in that age of AI, kind of like that example I was talking about, where in the world of refrigeration, right? We thought the refrigerator manufacturers like Frigidaire, Amana, GE, Whirlpool were going to win, but the real winner was people that actually put refrigeration to work, like Coca-Cola. Right, cold food supply chains actually won out in the end, and so we're going to see that as well. And so bringing all these concepts together, I hope people watching our shows, if you're a startup out there, you're trying to figure out how to build a new product or new business idea, something inspires you there. If you're an author wanting to share an idea that's going to change and transform this age of AI that we're in, come join us. And of course, if you're a CEO or company or CXO that's building this stuff, we want to share those stories. So just let us know. Reach out to Elle on our team, and of course, reach out to any of us if you want to be on the show. So happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday. See you next week. Bye, everyone.